Hey y'all, it's because Mama said so, and I wanted to share with you what my family ate this week. I tried out some new recipes, and I also made some classic favorites. Plus, we also had a leftover night, and we had a pizza night. And Little Caesars fed the family. Yay! On this night, I wanted to try something new. My husband is a police officer and he is on nights right now, and I thought it might be fun to have some baked oatmeal ready for him when he got off shift in the morning for him to have for breakfast before he went to bed. As you can see, I've added my eggs and my vanilla, and I added milk to this bowl, and then we're going to add oats and brown sugar. This is so delicious. This was a super simple recipe. It bakes up really good. The top of it is slightly crispy, and it has almost like a spice cake kind of feeling to it, or an oatmeal cookie, and it is so good. But we made this at bedtime is when I made this, so that way it would be nice and fresh in the morning and ready for him to have for breakfast. I thought about a couple of different things that I would love to try. I would love to try a version of this maybe where I did coconut flakes and bananas and chocolate chips, and maybe call it Chunky Monkey baked oatmeal. And then I could also try doing one with nuts and apples and like an apple spice baked oatmeal. There's so many different flavors. I even thought of a cream cheese blueberry. Who knows, down the road I might get a little fancy with my baked oatmeal. But here I've added the spices, I've added brown sugar and white sugar, and I'm giving it just a stir until all of that oatmeal is coated. This is done with quick oats, but I'm sure you could do it with old-fashioned, but quick oats just seem to fit the bill. And once everything is kind of mixed together, and there's no liquid left in the bottom, I'm going to add it to a sprayed 9x13 baking dish, and we're going to bake it for about 45 minutes, and then it will be ready to go and perfect. And oh, it was absolutely delicious. We just cut it up into squares to serve, and it is so filling and it is so delicious, and I really seriously cannot wait to try other options and other ways to do this. Here is the baked oatmeal out of the oven. It looks so good, and I cannot even tell you how good this smells. You can also hear my daughter in the background serenading us. The next thing I decided to make was sourdough biscuits. So one night this week, I wanted to have chicken stew and biscuits. And I usually do a homemade biscuits, but I've been doing sourdough, so I wanted to try sourdough biscuits. Here you see that I am adding my butter to my flour, and I'm letting my stand mixer just combine it with a whisk attachment or a paddle attachment until it is about pea-sized amounts, and then I can add my sourdough starter, my salt, and my baking powder. At this point, there are several recipes that I've seen on the internet where you let your biscuits sit for a long ferment, but I've always felt like biscuits, and everything that I've ever known about biscuits, is that your butter has to be in pieces that you can see, and it needs to be cold in order for there to be a good pop in the oven to be able to get height to your biscuits. So I chose to go ahead and roll them out as soon as they were mixed up, and I let them sit for about 20 minutes while the oven preheated, and I felt like that was more than enough because we only used 1.5 cups of flour and the rest was sourdough starter. There was a lot of sourdough in these biscuits. So one thing you're going to see me do is a technique that you can do in order to get your biscuits to be nice and flaky and have those like layers that are so yummy. You roll your biscuit dough out to about 1/2 inch, then cut it in half and stack it, and then roll it again to about 1/2 inch, cut it in half again, and then stack it. This creates those layers that you're looking for in your biscuits. Then you can use your biscuit cutter, or if you just want to cut into squares so it's quick and easy, that's okay too. But like I said, we added them to a parchment-lined baking sheet, And we baked these at, I believe, I'll have the recipe at the end of this video, but I believe they were at about 425 for about 14 to 15 minutes. Once these go into the oven, depending on the size that you cut them is how long to bake them. I believe the original recipe that I was following said for about 17 to 18 minutes, but I did mine just a little bit thinner and maybe a little bit smaller, so I got more biscuits and they weren't quite as thick, because I'm going to be making a chicken stew that will get poured over these biscuits. It's kind of a play on chicken and dumplings or chicken pot pie, but with homemade biscuits, and my family really loves it. We've been eating it for a very long time. I've even made biscuits before where I've thrown cheese into them and made cheddar biscuits, and it's done it with this chicken stew, and it is so good too. Here I'm just going ahead and pulling together the rest of the dough so I can cut out more biscuits. And to be honest, the uglier the better. The uglier the biscuits are, it seems like they just turn out the flakiest and the tallest and the best. So I don't mind an ugly biscuit because it always turns out good. And I always save myself just a little piece of dough to try. Here they are out of the oven, and I brushed them with butter and then set them aside and in a warm spot so they could stay warm until my chicken stew was ready. Here I am doing my chicken stew. I have added butter to a large pot, and then I am adding about a diced onion. I actually had these diced onions left over from my freezer cooking day, and so I didn't have to chop those. Yay, one less thing. But I'm going to mix those together until the onions are translucent. Then I'll add flour and chicken stock and carrots to the pot, and it'll start the base for a really, really good chicken stew. Then I've got my husband behind me. He is deboning some chicken for me that I had left over from, again, my freezer cooking that I did earlier in the previous week. I had some left over, and so he's deboning that for me, so it'll be ready to go. This is one of our family's favorites. We have made it for years, and it is so versatile and it is so easy. I have done a myriad of different vegetables in this, but for this particular day I'm actually going to do canned peas and canned corn because I had it in stock in my pantry, and then I'm going to add chicken, and it made it just a super easy, super quick dinner on this day. Even with making the homemade biscuits, it still was less than an hour. After the chicken stew starts to get a little bit thick, I'll add heavy cream and turn off the heat, and it'll be ready to go ahead and add my already cooked chicken to allow it to warm through. It's a lot of chicken, but we like chicken stews, so we don't mind having a little bit extra left over. I added salt, pepper, and parsley to this dish. It's very, very simple, very delicious, and most people usually have these ingredients on hand, which is awesome. And basically with doing the flour and the butter and the cream, you're making your homemade cream of chicken soup. Which is nice because there's no cream of soup in this. I don't mind the canned stuff, but I know a lot of people would prefer not to use it, and this is just one of those great classic recipes where you're basically making it homemade yourself as you're going, which is a bonus. Here's what it looks like in the bowl. I've got 3 of those biscuits with a little of the stew poured over the top. It is so good, so comforting, perfect for a cold day. The next thing I'm gonna make is actually a freezer meal that I made in the previous week, and it is beef broccoli. Everything is in that video, but I will have the recipe at the end of this video so you can see what exactly I put in the bag. But this is gonna sit on low for about 8 hours while I am at work. And then when I come home, I will add a few more ingredients. Fast forward It is after school, I am home, and I am adding a can of baby corn drained, a can of water chestnuts drained, and a package of broccoli. I am also taking about 3 heaping tablespoons of cornstarch and adding a little water to the can, about a half a cup, and pouring that into my slow cooker as well. Over the next hour, all of these ingredients will get nice and hot, and then that cornstarch will thicken our beef broccoli. In the Instant Pot right behind me, you don't see it, but I have rice, and I just use the rice button. I love the rice button on my Instant Pot. All the thinking is taken care of. But here in a second, I'll show you what the bowl looked like. This is something my family really loves. We love Chinese food. And so here it is. I did the rice with beef broth, so it has a little bit of a darker color, but it was so good. This is something that was so easy to pull together. And again, it's actually my daughter Allie's one of her very favorites. On this night, I was in a rush because my husband had to leave at about 5:30 to head to go out on patrol, and I got home at 4:15. So I was making fried pork chops, mashed potatoes, peppered gravy, and Amish corn, and I needed to get it done in about an hour so that way he could take some to work with him, and we actually accomplished it. This is Amish corn. I added corn, butter, cream cheese, sugar, salt, and pepper, and set my Instant Pot on manual for 8 minutes. And then I let it do a slow or natural release for about 10 minutes. To a plate, I went ahead and added about 2 cups of flour, and I'm adding salt, pepper, and seasoned salt to my flour. I did about a teaspoon of each, but measure with your heart, and you know what your family likes. I added a little bit of seasoned salt to my pork chops, which is what we're making, and I'm not going to coat them in batter or anything. We're just going to do a very simple patting them into the flour, and then we'll take them over and we'll fry them in a mixture of vegetable oil and bacon grease. Of course, this will also be the base for our gravy when we do our gravy here in just a bit. I put my heat in my pan on about medium to medium high. You don't want it too high because these are thick pork chops, and you want them to be able to cook for about 8 to 10 minutes on each side-ish, depending on how thick your pork chops are, without the breading on the outside burning. That is sometimes a problem. If you notice that your breading is burning before your pork chops are done, it's probably because your heat is too high. You want a gentle sizzle when you drop that pork chop in. What you'll notice after about 7 minutes or so is you'll start to see pink liquid and even sometimes blood coming up from your pork chop, and that lets you know that the other side is starting to cook and you're ready to go. Here is my pan with my vegetable oil and just a little dollop of bacon grease. Of course, all Southern mamas, we have it next to our stove where we save it. I actually have 2 pans that I'm going to be using so I can get through these 8 pork chops a little bit quicker. These were a family size assorted pork chops, so they're all different shapes, they're all different sizes, but they are very inexpensive, and so they make for a very frugal meal. The goal is to flip these pork chops 1 time, which is why you want to make sure that they are good and browned on one side and cooked through before you flip them. Because what you don't want to do is keep flipping them over and over again, because not only will you steam them and the breading won't be crispy on the outside, but you also run the risk of knocking all of the flour off of them as well. As you can see, they are starting to have red liquid come to the top, which means we're about ready to flip them. Make sure and monitor the heat. If you start to notice that things are getting too dark or burning, go ahead and turn your grease down. But as you can see, there's a good simmer going in the fat, but it's not too terribly hot to where you're scorching your pork chops. I feel like pork is one of those meats that's a little bit temperamental and can get really dry really fast if you cook it too hard and too hot too fast. So you definitely want to go a little low and a little slow on these in order to get them cooked all the way through. I feel like I have made mashed potatoes so many times on my channel. I'm almost sad that I have to show you again my pork chop process, but I feel like every single time I do my mashed potatoes, my pork chops, dear Lord, every time I do my mashed potatoes, I feel like I do them differently. And so in this particular day, I'm adding seasoned salt, and pepper, and then I will add a stick of melted butter, half a cup of milk, and half a cup of sour cream, and just mash that all together. It's a good basic flavored mashed potato that goes so well with the real hearty pork chops and the gravy that I'll make as well. And remember gravy math from my previous videos. Half a cup of fat, half a cup of flour, and 2 to 4 cups of liquid depending on how thick or thin you want your gravy to be. So I drained off all but about half a cup of the fat out of my pan that I made my pork chops in and added half a cup of flour, and now I'm adding my 2 to 4 cups of milk and whisking it around. This will get nice and thick and make a wonderful peppered gravy. I also added in salt and plenty of pepper. You want to be able to see those flecks of pepper in your gravy, and it adds such an incredible flavor to your mashed potatoes. This is a Southern classic gravy that you do over potatoes. Sometimes you can do it with cube steak, like chicken fried steak, which is actually what I initially planned to make, but then I realized I didn't have cube steak. I had pork chops, so we made pork chops. Here is the Amish corn in the Instant Pot. Again, I did this on manual high for 8 minutes and then let it do a natural release for 10 minutes before quick releasing the rest of the steam. I'm mixing in the cream cheese and the butter, and it just kind of melts together into this amazing creamed corn. This is something that is actually my husband's favorite, is that corn. Here is my plate. I am starving. Thank you so much for coming and cooking with me this week. Take care of yourself, your precious cargo, and why? Because Mama said so.